All right, I think we're going to get started here. Can everybody hear me? Quick thumbs up. I got a good thumbs up. So welcome to, I believe, one of the last sessions on the last day of the Tableau conference. It's a privilege for us to be here. It's a privilege, actually, I think, for us to be here on the last day, right? Can try and
Absolutely.
synergize some of the things that we've learned into our presentation. But I am over on the right. My name is Major Jeff Barnes. I'm currently the Chief Medical Information Officer for DHA Medical Logistics. I'm a pharmacist by training, but then the Air Force has kind of introduced me to the world of data nerdiness, and so that's why we're here.
I'm Nigel Stone. It's a tremendous honor and privilege for me to be here, especially with Major Barnes. It's truly an honor to be with him. Talking about Majors, are there any retirees or veterans in the audience? Wow, thank you. Thanks for your service, guys. And moving on, you'll see that's part of the heart of our presentation is helping the retirees and as we move on.
Well, so that goes straight to it. And by the way, I'm going to play a little game with myself. You should join along. Some of you might be here because of Nigel's accent, and so we're really looking forward to the gamification of how the accessibility words show up with his accent. Hopefully we can see how that goes. But we're going to go into our mission a little bit because we're a military organization, go into our current state and some of what we're trying to do with our business intelligence and insights, how that refines some of our mission, and then get into something we refer to as clinical baseline management. Because we're a part of DHA MedLog, one of the things we're really trying to look at is how do we right size our medical equipment for our patients and our providers? And so we work with a lot of engineers, we work with a lot of IT folks, biomeds, practitioners, right, patients. So a key piece there, I think, is all those folks, I think, are aware of data, right, data driven, but they're not necessarily all data generators that they know of, right? Our experience has been that they're receiving a lot of data, but it kind of stops at them. And so we're trying to find ways of synergizing all of those components in. And you can see the group we're with, Healthcare Technology Management here, some of the mission that we have. But in truth, our data reflects our operations, right? The DoD, the military in general, has 4 different branches. We have different components inside each one of those branches, and not only do those components not necessarily talk to each other, but it's very difficult to talk then across branches as well. And so our operations then reflect our data. If we're talking about data culture, we're also talking about joint culture. We're fighting both of those battles at the same time. And so we throw this analysis up there because this isn't actually what it's like, but we do have a map of all of our various sources of data. Last I checked, I believe there's 221 authoritative sources of data that we are trying to utilize and bring in. And so though this isn't actually it's very, very close to what we're trying to pull in and synergize to try and make more concrete understanding of what it is we're doing.
Are there any folks here that mine data through the military health systems? Oh wow, so there's quite a few of you. So as you know, it's fairly complex. And with Tableau, it helps us to filter and to sort of make it easier because there's such a heavy learning curve to get to this information. And by Tableau, it enables us to get a little closer to, it lowers the learning curve.
So I'm going to get into a little bit of data science on that exact point, Nigel. I think one of the first things you learn on the informatics side, on the data side, right, is this data information knowledge platform. There's some wisdom that kind of goes above knowledge. But when you look at what I've talked about, right, our operations, our data, it's kind of this pyramid we traditionally think of, right? We have a lot of data, we have fewer people that understand that data, what it means as information, right? Tying it to key components and what it means for us, and then even fewer still that can take that data and actually make knowledgeable decisions or knowledgeable understanding about it. And I think traditionally Tableau plays that role, right? Visual analytics plays that role in really helping us understand that information layer as it comes up and present that data directly to those decision makers in a way that makes that make sense. And so as I talk about our corporate challenge, right, our culture as an organization, then that data culture, then we need to find some way to turn this on its head. I already talked a lot about how data comes in from all over the places, and by properly synergizing that, still with the amount of information folks that we have, we're trying to crowdsource the best ideas. And so that's not just usability, that's not just visual analytics, that's trying to find ways of getting that data back out into your traditional providers, your traditional engineers that want to use data, but it's sometimes very difficult for them to access it in the areas that we have. And there's some other challenges by the nature of the DoD and what they do, security, operations, right? Those create barriers as well. And so visual analytics, right, what we're talking about here with data then becomes a platform in to do that. So this introduces us kind of the use case of if we talk about this organizational culture, right, and this data culture, what are we going to do about that? Well, if we pull in this data from all over the place, we're not just pulling in the data, right? We're pulling in the expertise from our clinicians, our business partners, right? All those folks that are looking at payment operations optimization. And then we're also looking at admin support, right? Manpower, simple things that your organization, our organization does all the time. And I talked about how that's splintered across various components as we come in and try and stand up this organization called the Defense Health Agency, where we're trying to do all of these things together. All of those inputs, not just the data, but the information and knowledge need to come into one component area. And data, in this case, right, data analytics, visual analytics can help us achieve that. It's two sides of the same coin. And so we've introduced what we refer to as equipment baselines. Because decisions are being made across all of these vastly different components, we can try and provide some standardization just with guardrails to help people be better informed on the decisions that we want to get them to, right? This is usability and decision making, not just the analytics. And the analytics then provide the backbone to that. And specifically here we have 3 categories, you see them up here, where we can make decisions only at the headquarters level. We call those integrated products. We can make decisions shared between the headquarters level and our various clinics, hospitals, regions, markets. Or we can push that decision straight off locally if there's not something we believe we can get a bang for a buck at a headquarters level. And so now we have 3 tiers where as long as we're properly formatting that data and getting it to the end user, they can be informed with whatever decision making that they need to make, and it's still in line with the culture and both the data culture and the organizational culture we're trying to put into place. And then we get into the analytics, and I'll open up with Nigel here a little bit what we're looking at. But because we have so many different data sources and we have access to all of them, it's actually a real opportunity for us in the DoD. We actually have access to all these data sources directly. Various components, especially if we're looking at a regression model or an analytic model, right? Very, very subtle correlations we can start pulling in to see if that informs our decision making. Nigel, you want to talk a little bit about those at all?
Yes. So as DHA, all the facilities are moving on transitioning to DHA, and to maintain the high care, Tableau helps us, and most of you are familiar with some of these words, the workload, reminding that, and it gets very intricate what each side does. So we're talking about Army, Air Force, and Navy. We're combining all the information and how we can, like I said, maintain that high standard of care with the different pieces, how this puzzle is going to move around so there's no a drop in our care. And so as you can see some of the things, we life cycle protection, life cycle management, we can develop these workbooks and these worksheets that enable us to do that.
And so I'm going to kind of get into a specific use case here, right? So you can see what we started with and how that applies. But to do, I kind of want to share an anecdote that I think describes a little bit of what I'm talking about, and perhaps you've heard it, right? In a joint environment, if you're up there, you can tell somebody, hey, go secure a building, right? And our 4 branches will all handle that differently. The Navy will go in, shut off the lights, and lock the doors. The Army will post somebody at every entry and exit point, barrier the whole thing, and provide artillery around the outside. The Marines will go in, clear everybody out, and set up a headquarters. And the Air Force will set up a 3-year lease with an option to buy in the building. And that's funny, but well, that's a great joke because 1, it's funny, but 2, it's also rooted in extreme accuracy. Right? And because of those cultural differences, just in the term of securing a facility, we have to again find those guardrails, and so that's shown here. I'm going to hand this off with Nigel, right? So we had a hospital as we've started to roll out this implementation that was asking for another MRI. and we'll go into some of the analytics we broke down. And you'll see we don't spend a lot of time really on the presentation layer, right? A lot of the fancy things you can do because we're using this internally. But I think you can see the power real quick.
Sure.
Nigel, you want to walk them through?
Sure. So we are building up to exciting slide. This is not it. This is really typically what a lot of visitors will do at Tableau. But over here, we're looking at where do the patients live, right? We get this from various MHS systems. Where, for any kind of modality, right? We can, if it's pharmacy, you get into your blood work. So where our patients live, and all the whole demographics about them, the age, retirees, and then what type of patients, like I said, what type of patient is this, all right? So moving forward, this is going to be important because our retiree population is expanding very quickly.
And so you can see here, just really quick, some general classification that we did to try and start picturing where the patients were around our areas. I want you to, in the back of your mind, keep this map in mind as we go through all these analytic layers that we're going to start combining in.
So in this scenario, as Major Barnes said, we're talking about the MRI, the magnetic resonance. And so from now we know where the patients live. Now, where is the care provided? Okay, and when is the care provided? It's very important because you got facilities that have open hours, and you can see the graph represents at the bottom the number of hours, the hour per day, and the number of exams they do. You can see this is about 7 or 8 different types of MRIs in the whole national capital area, and we comparing. Tableau helps us to compare large volumes of data. So what time are these MRIs working? So if another facility in this case is asking for an MRI, can the other sites take the impact? And so we try to move and look at the whole thing. So
yeah, so I love these visualizations, right? As with the informatics background, because it's not a pie chart. Okay. And number 2, again, we haven't done a lot of usability here because our user base that is going to be using this data immediately picks up, right? They immediately anchor on what we're trying to show them here, right? 24-hour operations. And so if I can informatics with you guys for a minute, right? We see this dip really early in the morning. Again, 5 MRIs on this visualization. This dip really early in the morning, and then it comes back to really large spikes early in the AM, which is very traditional to the military. But you have this dip again during lunch, and then this other bump that kind of goes back down through the afternoon, right? And so we have a lot of variability in there, but even more importantly, if you look here, you look at a massive decrease over lunch and a lot of variation between our various MRIs that are out there, which really changes the calculus if we're going to make a decision on a specific MRI.
And a very critical piece of providing this care is our radiologists, our physicians. And this is, time-wise, this is kind of important. So we analyze when the radiologists read these exams. We can see, so again, this is all to do with radiology. This is days of the week on the right-hand side, and on the left is the hours of the day. And each different color represents a different radiologist. And when they read, and how many they read. So, and then what type they read too. As you know, they got some read higher RVUs, and some read lower. So there's this whole complex network of what kind of care is provided.
Yeah, and so again, another great visualization if we can try and orient. Last we talked about when the patient was coming in to have their procedure taken, right? But if anybody's had an MRI or any kind of radiology service, right, there's a delay between when you have that procedure taken and when you get the results, right, when they call you back, when you go back to your provider, right? And so what we see here on this presentation, is this is when the readings are being done, right? This is when the actual study is taking place. And so you see the same rather remarkable drop, right during lunchtime, almost as if everybody's kind of orchestrated in when they take that. But also look at the large difference between the mornings and then the rest of the day. Right, so again, very classic in the military, kind of standing in the way here, my apologies. Very classic in the military, but you can see some opportunities starting to develop, right? And then on the right side, people can start criticizing my analytics, right? But we do have some operations on Sunday and Saturday that kind of change the schedule But as part of the visualization, again, this doesn't look big, but this is in a scale of 500s. And so, if you look at Tuesday just as an outlier, right, our workload balance now is stretched both for when the patients are getting their studies done and when we're reading those studies, that is potentially contributing to this requirement if we need another MRI. Right, so now the picture is starting to become clear. What does that mean to the patient, Nigel?
Right. And I think this is one of the most exciting slides here at the show. But anyway, let me show you, explain to you what's happening here. There's three very complex sets of data moving on this on the sheet. So one of them is we explained before, where the patients live, okay? And now the Biomed, Navy Biomed did this incredible Excel spreadsheet. They took them 6 months, a whole bunch of folks. It's zip code to our facilities. But then you got the drive times, the congested drive times, and the uncongested drive times, all right? So now you plug all that data together. Now we can see pharmacy, getting your blood work or whatever, how long it's going to take a patient, whatever type of patient, to drive to the facility and get their care. All right, so why people, for example, on this sheet, in the red numbers indicate congested drive time, why in this instance are people driving 1.5 hours to go and get their care? Surely there's a place that is closer they can get their care. And so you can see how this Tableau helps us to unweave this. So let's get to the bottom of this and find a closer a venue of healthcare.
And so you look here again, another layer of analytics that we're putting in, and now this is the core of what we're putting into a dashboard, internal use, right, that we can share with some of those providers, and then also into a data model, right, a regression that we're trying to look at how to make decisions on add, replace, or sometimes shrink based on what the patient needs are. But looking at this from a logistics standpoint, right, with a little bit of informatics in there, right, we're now adding in the actual impact to the patient, back with operations within the clinical community, back to our scheduling and facilities folks as to when that study is taking place, back into where our patient empanelment is, outside of a service-specific clinic or a local-specific clinic, but broadly as a quote-unquote market, as DHA calls them. And suddenly, by synergizing all these things in together, which if you're working in the government right now is very difficult sometimes to work between various offices, the analytics themselves have proven that out. And so if we talk about what the point of this organization culture is, right? Our data culture is, at this point, prevented us from buying an extra MRI because we just realized some simple advantages we could take place. And then the lessons we have learned with that are getting into these clinical equipment baselines, where now we'll have a model for, as we're looking at these markets, looking at these MTFs, what is the right size, right? Can we get equipment to a point where the patients have a standard expectation of what's coming in and we've optimized it so the scheduling, the workload balance, and the data is all reflected across what all of our patients need to do, because as some of those veterans, I think, raise their hands, right, your experience may vary. You want to talk anything about that, Nigel? You want to move on?
No, I think it's the underlying theme here is the more information we have, the better we can manage it, the better decision we can make. And this is the whole theme here, is that, and if we can display it in a easy to understand format, and so moving up to officer level and to general officer level, they don't want to see a lot of information. They want to see results, and this is what it's going to cost if you make this decision. And I think Lieutenant General Place he's new to our directorate, and this is the theme that he's starting to move on to.
Yeah, so the director of the Defense Health Agency, right? It's this organization that, by Congress's own request, is coming in to take care of healthcare across the various services down to the clinics and hospitals, right? As he's taken on, he's really noticed and challenged us with some things, right? Thinking innovatively, we realize that there's a long road ahead and a lot of change management ahead, right? In this particular case, I'll go back to the point I made before, right? Our organizational culture is going to be reflective of our data culture and vice versa, because data is a universal language. And so I'll highlight that back again. When it comes to MRIs, when it comes to what we're doing, if it comes to securing an MRI, right, there's a big difference between closing the doors and shutting off the lights and a 3-year lease with an option to buy. And so that really, I think, is the end of what we have. We'll stand to the side here to kind of talk through with a few folks. I do want to encourage you to give us some feedback on the survey. This was a mercifully brief, I hope. But maybe informational, maybe affects you or something you can apply in your own day-to-day operations. But we really have kind of gone outside the box here to try and present this with you guys. Any feedback you can give us is greatly appreciated. And other than that, thank you guys very much.
Thank you.